Commander Jake Morrison stood in the control room of the UES Valiant and watched the stars through the large window. His ship had been traveling through space for 6 months now, going farther from Earth than any human had ever gone before. The mission was simple: explore new star systems and look for signs of other intelligent life. Jake never imagined they would actually find it. The alarm systems began making loud noises. Lieutenant Casey Brooks turned around in her chair and looked at the screen in front of her. Her face went pale as she read the information appearing on her display. "Commander, we have a ship approaching us," she said. Her voice was shaking a little. "It's big. Really big." Jake walked over to stand behind her chair. He looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. The alien ship was at least 3 times the size of the Valiant. It had a dark hull covered with strange markings that glowed with a red light. The ship looked like it was built for war, not exploration. "Open all communication channels," Jake ordered. "Let's try to make contact." The communications officer, a young man named Danny Pierce, worked quickly at his station. Within seconds, strange sounds filled the bridge. The alien language sounded harsh and aggressive, with clicks and growls that made everyone uncomfortable. "The computer is trying to translate," Danny said. "Give it a minute." The ship's artificial intelligence had been programmed with thousands of possible language patterns. It worked through the alien transmission, comparing sounds and patterns to its database. After 30 seconds, words began appearing on the screen. "Greetings from the Vorathian Empire," Danny read out loud. "You have entered our territory. State your purpose and origin." Jake felt a wave of relief. At least they were trying to communicate, instead of shooting first. He cleared his throat and prepared to give the standard first contact response that Earth's diplomats had created years ago. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Valiant. We come in peace from the planet Earth. We are explorers seeking knowledge and friendship with other civilizations." Danny sent the message using the ship's most powerful transmitters. The crew waited in silence for a response. Seconds felt like hours as they stared at the alien vessel on their screens. The computer finished analyzing the Vorathian greeting and provided more information. It showed that the message had included a gesture of respect in their culture. The artificial intelligence recommended that humans respond with a similar gesture to show they understood and accepted peaceful contact. "The computer suggests we send them our diplomatic package," Casey said. "It includes images of Earth, information about our species, and gestures of peace." Jake nodded. "Send them everything we have." Danny activated the diplomatic package. It was a collection of files that Earth's best scientists had put together. The package included pictures of Earth's continents and oceans, recordings of human music, mathematical formulas to show intelligence, and several video clips of humans performing peaceful gestures. One of these gestures was a simple hand signal that humans used to mean "okay" or "good." The package transmitted across space to the Vorathian ship. On board the alien vessel, Supreme Commander Jothik watched the human transmission with growing anger. He was a tall creature with 4 arms and skin that looked like dark stone. When he saw the hand gesture, Jothik roared in rage. His crew stepped back in fear. In Vorathian culture, that particular hand signal was the worst insult possible. It meant that the other person's ancestors were cowards, and their family had no honor. It was used only when declaring blood feuds or starting wars. "These humans mock us," Jothik growled. "They enter our space, and then insult the Empire with the gesture of ultimate disrespect. Prepare all ships for battle. Send word to the Imperial fleet. We are going to destroy their home world." Back on the Valiant, Jake and his crew had no idea what they had just done. They waited for a response from the alien ship, hoping for a friendly reply. Instead, the Vorathian vessel powered up its weapons. Energy readings went off the charts. "Commander, they're charging weapons," Casey shouted. "Multiple targeting locks on our position." Jake's training kicked in immediately. "Full power to shields. Turn us around and engage the faster-than-light drive. Get us out of here now." The Valiant turned sharply and began accelerating. The crew was pushed back in their seats as the ship's engines burned at maximum power. Behind them, the Vorathian ship fired. Bright, red energy beams cut through space, missing the Valiant by only a few hundred meters. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel just as more weapons fire reached their position. The stars stretched into lines, and then the Valiant was safe, racing back toward Earth at incredible speed. Jake sat down in his command chair and took a deep breath. His hands were shaking. Casey was already reviewing the transmission logs. She played back the diplomatic package and watched the hand gesture again. Her computer was comparing it to the Vorathian response. "Oh no," she whispered. "Commander, I think we made a terrible mistake." She showed Jake what the computer had discovered. The Vorathian Empire had responded to the hand gesture with a formal declaration. The translation was now clear. "You have insulted the Empire. Your species will be eliminated. Prepare for war." Jake felt sick. One hand gesture. One simple mistake. Admiral Linda Hayes walked into the emergency meeting room deep below the Rocky Mountains. Every important military leader from every nation on Earth was already there, sitting around a large table covered with screens and holographic displays. The room was completely silent as she entered. Everyone looked worried. President Chris Bennett stood at the head of the table. He had dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. The emergency transmission from the Valiant had arrived 6 hours ago, and nobody had rested since then. "Admiral Hayes, thank you for coming so quickly," the president said. "Please tell everyone what we know." 2. Linda activated the main display. A recording from the Valiant began playing. Everyone watched as Commander Morrison's crew sent their peaceful message to the alien ship. They saw the hand gesture. Then they watched the violent response and the Valiant's desperate escape. "This is the Vorathian Empire," Linda explained. "According to the data our ship collected, their vessel was using technology far beyond our current capabilities. Their weapons could have destroyed the Valiant in seconds. The only reason our people survived is because they ran away immediately." General Aaron Blake, the head of Earth's combined military forces, spoke up. "How long until they reach Earth? We don't know," Linda admitted. "The Valiant will arrive in 2 more days. But the alien ship might be faster. It might already be on its way. We could have days, or we could have hours." A Russian general named Viktor Petrov shook his head. "This is insane. We started a war by accident with an alien empire we know nothing about. How do we fight an enemy we can't understand?" 1. "We start by preparing every defense we have," President Bennett said. "I've already ordered all military forces to the highest alert level. Our satellites are scanning deep space constantly. If anything enters our solar system, we'll know about it." Dr. Lisa Morgan entered the room carrying a large tablet computer. She was the head of experimental weapons development and one of the smartest scientists on Earth. She looked exhausted, but excited. "I've been studying the sensor readings from the Valiant," she said. "The Vorathian ship uses a lot of energy. I mean an incredible amount. Their shields alone use more power than our entire ship. But that might be a weakness." Everyone turned to look at her. "How is using more power a weakness?" asked Admiral Hayes. "Because they need to generate that power somehow," Lisa explained. "Big ships need big reactors. Big reactors have weak points. If we can find where they generate their power, we might be able to hurt them." Quote, General Blake pulled up a display showing Earth's current military assets. "We have 600 combat spacecraft. Most of them are designed for moving between Earth and Mars. They have basic weapons for destroying asteroids or defending against pirates. None of them were built to fight a war. EFS. It's not SAH. Oliva. Most of them were built to fight a war. Then we modify them," Lisa said. "We add every weapon we can. Missiles, railguns, lasers, anything that might damage their ships. We won't match their technology. But we can use numbers, President Bennett looked around the table. Does anyone believe we can actually win this war? The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Hayes spoke. Winning might not be the right word, sir, but we can make them regret attacking us. Humans have one advantage that this alien empire might not expect. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to be creative when we're desperate. Over the next 2 days, Earth transformed into a military fortress. Every spaceship that could fly was armed with weapons. Civilian ships were converted into carriers for fighters. Space stations became gun platforms. The moon's research bases were turned into military outposts. Colonel Pete Hoffman supervised the defense preparations at Mars Station. He watched as workers installed missile launchers on mining ships and attached armor plates to tourist vessels. It looked ridiculous, but it was all they had. "Sir, we're receiving a signal," his communications officer reported. "It's the Valiant. They're back in the solar system." Pete felt relief wash over him. "Have them dock immediately. I want to speak with Commander Morrison personally." When Jake Morrison arrived at Mars Station, he looked terrible. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Pete brought him to a private office and closed the door. "Tell me everything about that ship," Pete said. Jake closed his eyes and thought back to the encounter. It was huge, but it moved smoothly. Very precise. Their weapons charged quickly. Maybe 5 seconds from cold to full power. The hull had markings that glowed red. The light pulsed like a heartbeat. Pete typed notes into his computer. "What about weak points? Did you see anything that looked vulnerable?" There were sections near the rear that glowed brighter than others," Jake said. "Maybe engines or power systems. And the weapons seemed to fire from specific points on the hull, not from everywhere." "Good," Pete said. "That means they have to aim. If we're fast enough, we might be able to dodge." Across Earth, similar conversations were happening. Every piece of information about the Vorithian ship was studied and analyzed. Scientists worked day and night to understand the alien technology. Military strategists developed plans for fighting an enemy with superior weapons. Dr. Lisa Morgan made a breakthrough on the second day. She discovered that the Vorithian ship had used a specific frequency for its shields. If Earth's weapons could match that frequency, they might be able to penetrate the alien defenses. "It's not guaranteed," she told Admiral Hayes. "But it's better than nothing. I'm modifying our missiles to pulse at the same frequency. Maybe 1 in 10 will get through their shields." Admiral Hayes looked at the star charts on her screen. 1 in 10. Against an empire that probably has thousands of ships. "It's not about the odds," Lisa said quietly. "It's about showing them we won't surrender. Even if we lose, we make them pay for every inch of space." On the 3rd day after the Valiant's return, the deep space sensors detected something. It was big and moving fast, coming from the direction where the Valiant had encountered the Vorithian ship. Alarms rang across every military base on Earth. President Bennett stood in the command center and watched the approaching contact on the displays. It was alone, just one ship, but it was enormous. "Is that the same vessel?" he asked. "No, sir," a technician replied. "It's bigger. Much bigger. The sensors estimate it's at least 5 times the size of the ship that attacked the Valiant." Admiral Hayes felt her heart racing. "They sent a bigger ship to finish the job. They want to make sure we know how outmatched we are. All forces, prepare for combat," President Bennett ordered. The Vorithian warship emerged from the darkness of space like a massive predator. Admiral Kravas stood on the command deck, his forearms crossed behind his back. He had conquered 23 worlds during his career. This primitive planet would be number 24. "Scan the area," he ordered. "Show me their defenses." The tactical officer worked at his station. "I detect 147 vessels, Commander. They are small, approximately 1/10 our size. Their weapons appear to be primitive projectile and energy-based systems. Kravos laughed, a deep rumbling sound. 147 ships against the Emperor's fist. They are either very brave or very stupid. Destroy them all. Near Jupiter's orbit, Colonel Pete Hoffman watched the alien ship on his scanner. It was so large that it created its own gravity field. He could see smaller craft moving around it. Probably fighters or support ships. All squadrons, spread out, Pete commanded. Delta pattern. Don't give them one target to shoot at. The human ships scattered in different directions. They moved fast, using the gravity from Jupiter to slingshot themselves around the massive planet. It was a tactic they had practiced hundreds of times against each other in war games. Now they would see if it worked against an alien enemy. The Vorathian ship fired its main weapons. Massive beams of red energy cut through space, aimed at where the human ships had been seconds before. But the fighters were already gone, moving in unpredictable patterns. They missed, Pete said with surprise. Their targeting systems are slow. He led his squadron in a diving attack toward the alien ship's rear section. The area Jake Morrison had mentioned, where the glow was brighter. Pete armed his missiles and waited until he was close enough. Fire everything, he shouted. 20 missiles launched from the human fighters. They streaked toward the Vorathian ship, their guidance systems locked on the glowing section. The alien vessel's shields activated, creating a bubble of energy around the hull. Most of the missiles exploded harmlessly against the shields. But 3 of them, the ones modified by Dr. Lisa Morgan, with the matching frequency, passed through. They struck the hull and detonated. The explosions were small compared to the size of the ship, but they left visible damage. Armor plates cracked, and atmosphere vented into space from the holes. On the Vorathian command deck, alarms started ringing. Admiral Krivos looked at the damage reports with confusion. "How did their weapons penetrate our shields?" he demanded. "Unknown, Commander," the tactical officer replied. "The missiles used a frequency modulation that matched our shield harmonics. It should not be possible for such a primitive species to know this." Kravos felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty. These humans were not fighting like the other species he had conquered. They were not forming battle lines or trying to match his ship's power. They were attacking like insects, stinging from multiple directions. "Launch all fighters," he ordered. 50 Vorathian fighter craft emerged from the larger ship. They were sleek and fast, with weapons that could destroy a human ship with one hit. They spread out and began chasing the scattered human vessels. Lieutenant Megan Foster piloted one of Earth's fastest interceptors. She saw the alien fighters approaching and felt her pulse quicken. On her scanner, they looked incredibly advanced, but she had been flying since she was 16 years old. She knew how to handle a ship. A Vorathian fighter locked onto her and fired. Green energy bolts screamed past her cockpit. Megan threw her ship into a tight spiral, using a maneuver that would have made most pilots black out from the G-forces. The alien fighter tried to follow but could not match her sudden direction change. "These things fly like trucks," Megan said over the radio. "They're fast, but they can't turn worth anything." She flipped her ship around and returned fire. Her railgun sent a stream of metal slugs at the Vorathian fighter. Most missed, but a few struck the alien craft's wing. It spun out of control and exploded. "First kill," Megan shouted. "They can die, just like anything else." The battle spread across thousands of kilometers of space. Human ships darted between the Vorathian fighters, using the debris from Jupiter's rings as cover. They fired, retreated, and attacked again from different angles. On Earth, Admiral Linda Hayes watched the battle through live feeds from the combat ships. The tactical display showed a chaotic mess of ships moving in seemingly random patterns. But she could see the strategy working. "They're learning," she said to General Blake, who stood beside her. "Our pilots are adapting to the alien ships faster than the aliens can adapt to us." "We're still losing ships," Blake pointed out. "Every casualty is someone's son or daughter." Linda nodded grimly. War always has a cost. But we're making them pay too. Back in the battle, Colonel Pete Hoffman regrouped his squadron for another attack. He had lost 6 ships so far, but his pilots had destroyed 15 Varathian fighters and damaged the main ship multiple times. "Command, this is Colonel Hoffman," he transmitted, requesting permission to try something crazy. Admiral Hayes responded immediately. "Define crazy, Colonel." "I want to ram their ship," Pete said. "Not with my fighter. With something bigger." There was silence for a moment. Then Hayes spoke again. "What did you have in mind?" "Then, Oh." Pete looked at his scanner. There was a mining ship nearby. One of the converted civilian vessels. It was loaded with missiles and had minimal crew. The cargo hauler, Spirit of Denver. If we can get it close enough, we detonate everything on board. It might punch through their shields. "Do it," Hayes authorized. "But get the crew off first." The Spirit of Denver was an ugly ship, built for carrying ore between the asteroid belt and Mars. Captain Rachel White commanded the vessel with a crew of 8. When she received the orders, she did not hesitate. "Everyone to the escape pods," she ordered. "We've got 5 minutes." Her crew scrambled to evacuate, while Rachel set the ship's autopilot. She programmed it to accelerate at maximum speed, directly toward the Varathian warship. Then she armed every weapon on board, setting them all to explode on impact. She was the last one off, jumping into an escape pod just as the Spirit of Denver began its final run. The converted mining ship accelerated toward the alien vessel. Admiral Kravas saw it coming and ordered his weapons to fire. But the ship kept coming, its engines burning at maximum power. "Brace for impact," Kravas shouted. The Spirit of Denver crashed into the Varathian warship's shields. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, every weapon on board detonated simultaneously. The explosion was massive, a ball of fire and energy that lit up space like a small sun. The Varathian shields collapsed. The blast wave struck the hull directly, ripping a huge hole in the ship's side. Atmosphere and debris vented into space. Internal explosions rippled through multiple decks. On the command deck, Admiral Kravas held onto his station as the ship shook violently. Damage reports flooded in from every section. The humans had actually hurt his ship badly. "Retreat," he ordered, his pride wounded. "We will return with more ships." The Varathian warship turned and began accelerating away from Jupiter. Its remaining fighters broke off their attacks and returned to the damaged vessel. Within minutes, the entire alien force was fleeing back toward deep space. Colonel Pete Hoffman could not believe what he was seeing. Did we just win? The human ships did not pursue. They regrouped and counted their losses. But the alien ship was retreating, trailing atmosphere and debris. Admiral Hayes spoke to all the surviving ships. "Good work, everyone. Return to base for repairs and debriefing. This is just the beginning. But you showed them that Earth will not surrender easily." Supreme Commander Jothik stood before Emperor Vakorath in the great throne room of the Varathian homeworld. The Emperor was ancient, over 500 years old, kept alive by technology that the Empire had stolen from conquered worlds. His body was more machine than flesh now, but his mind was still sharp and cruel. "You are telling me that one ship retreated from primitive humans?" The Emperor's voice echoed through the chamber. Jothik kept his head bowed. "The humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. My Emperor. They do not follow predictable patterns. They sacrifice their own ships willingly. They use tactics that have no honor." The Emperor stood up from his throne. "I have conquered 147 worlds personally. I have destroyed civilizations that existed for millions of years. And you tell me that humans, who have barely left their own planet, are a threat?" They wounded the Emperor's fist. Jothik said quietly. "Admiral Kravas reported that their weapons somehow penetrated our shields. They adapted to our fighting style within hours." Vakorath was silent for a moment, processing this information. Finally, he spoke. Then we will show them what true power means. Gather the war fleet. Every available ship. We will turn their planet into dust and scatter it across space. No species insults the Vorathian Empire and survives. On Earth, the celebration of victory lasted only 2 days. Then the deep space sensors detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. Ships were entering the solar system. Not one or two, but hundreds of them. Dr. Lisa Morgan stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. This can't be right. The computer must be malfunctioning. Admiral Linda Hayes checked the data herself. It's accurate. I count over 800 Vorathian vessels. They're arranged in a battle formation that spans millions of kilometers. President Chris Bennett joined them in the command center. He looked at the tactical display and felt his hope dying. Can we fight that many? No, Linda said honestly. We can hurt them. We can make them pay. But we cannot win a direct battle against those numbers. General Aaron Blake pulled up Earth's defensive assets. We have 420 ships ready for combat. The rest are still being repaired or modified. We're outnumbered 2-1. Then we don't fight them directly, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Commander Jake Morrison entering the room. He had been attending a meeting with other ship captains about battle tactics. What do you suggest? President Bennett asked. Jake walked to the display and zoomed in on the approaching fleet. Look at how they're arranged. Perfect formation, every ship in its proper place. They're organized like a military parade. That's their weakness. How is organization a weakness? General Blake asked. Because it makes them predictable, Jake explained. They'll attack in formation. They'll follow their battle plans exactly. But we don't have to. We can split up, attack from multiple directions, force them to break formation. Dr. Lisa Morgan nodded slowly. Guerrilla warfare. Hit and run. Never give them a solid target. Exactly, Jake said. We use the asteroid belt. The planets. Anything we can for cover. We make them chase us through the entire solar system. Even if we can't win, we can slow them down and buy time. Time for what? President Bennett asked. Time to evacuate. Linda Hayes said quietly. We start moving civilians off Earth. Get as many people as possible to the outer colonies. If we lose, at least humanity survives somewhere. The decision was made quickly. Civilian ships began evacuating people from Earth's major cities. Priority was given to children, scientists, and skilled workers who could rebuild civilization elsewhere. It was a desperate plan, but it was better than nothing. The Vorathian fleet continued its advance. Supreme Commander Jothik led from his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. It was the largest ship in the Empire, equipped with weapons capable of cracking planets apart. The humans are moving their ships, his tactical officer reported. They are not forming a defensive line. They are spreading out across the system. Jothik studied the display. They are running. Prepare to pursue and destroy them all. The first engagement happened near the asteroid belt. Captain Greg Sullivan commanded a group of 30 fast attack ships. He watched the Vorathian fleet approach and waited until they were close to the dense field of rocks. Now, he ordered. The human ships dove into the asteroid belt, weaving between the massive rocks. The Vorathian ships followed, confident in their superior shields. But the asteroids were not natural obstacles. Earth's engineers had spent the last week placing explosives throughout the belt. Greg triggered the detonations. Hundreds of asteroids exploded simultaneously, creating a field of high-speed debris. The rocks tore through the Vorathian formation like bullets. Shields flared and failed under the constant impacts. 20 alien ships were destroyed in the first minute. Retreat deeper into the belt, Greg commanded. Make them follow us. The Vorathian fleet pursued. But their large ships had trouble navigating the dense asteroid field. They collided with rocks, crashed into each other, and struggled to maintain formation. The humans, with their smaller and more agile vessels, moved easily through the chaos. Supreme Commander Jothik watched his ships being picked apart and felt rage building inside him. Pull back. Reform outside the belt. We will go around it. But when the Vorathian fleet tried to exit the asteroid belt, they found human ships waiting. Lieutenant Megan Foster led a squadron of bombers armed with heavy missiles. They fired into the clustered alien ships and then disappeared back into the asteroids before return fire could hit them. They are using the environment against us, Jothik's tactical officer said. Every part of this system is a trap. Near Mars, Colonel Pete Hoffman prepared his own surprise. The red planet had massive dust storms that could last for months. Earth's weather control technology had been used to create an artificial storm that covered half the planet. When the Vorathian ships approached Mars, they encountered a wall of dust and wind. Their sensors were blinded by the storm. Human ships hiding in the dust attacked with missiles and then vanished before the aliens could target them. Admiral Kravos, commanding a section of the fleet, tried to push through the storm. Maintain course. Their weapons cannot hurt us significantly, but the constant small attacks were adding up. Every ship in his group had damage. Shields were failing from repeated hits. Crews were exhausted from constant alert status. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Morgan was working on a new weapon. She had studied the captured data from the Vorathian ships and found something interesting. Their power systems all operated on the same frequency network. They shared energy between ships to maintain their shields. If we can disrupt that network, she told Admiral Hayes, we might be able to make their shields fail all at once. How do we disrupt it? Hayes asked. Lisa held up a small device. This is an electromagnetic pulse generator, modified to match the Vorathian frequency. If we can get it close enough to their flagship, it should cascade through their entire fleet. That's a suicide mission, Hayes said. Whoever delivers that bomb won't make it back. I know, Lisa said quietly. But it might be our only chance to even the odds. Admiral Hayes sent out a call for volunteers. Within an hour, over 200 pilots had stepped forward. She chose Captain Dan Cooper, one of their best and most experienced pilots. Dan took the bomb and loaded it into his fighter. He said goodbye to his crew and his family over video link. Then, he launched toward the Vorathian fleet's center, where the Destroyer of Worlds waited. The flight took 3 hours. Dan flew his ship at maximum speed, dodging fire from Vorathian vessels. His shields failed halfway through the journey. His engines were hit and began leaking fuel, but he kept going. Supreme Commander Jothik saw the single human ship approaching, one fighter against the entire fleet. These humans truly are insane. Destroy it. Dozens of weapons fired at Dan's ship. He weaved between the blasts, using every trick he had learned in 20 years of flying. His ship was falling apart around him, but he was getting closer. When he was within a kilometer of the Destroyer of Worlds, Dan armed the electromagnetic pulse bomb. He transmitted one final message to Earth, for humanity, for Earth, for everyone who comes after us. Then he crashed his fighter into the Vorathian flagship's shields and detonated the bomb. The pulse spread through the Vorathian energy network like lightning. Every ship connected to the network felt their shields collapse simultaneously. For 30 seconds, the entire Vorathian fleet was vulnerable. Admiral Hayes saw the shields fail on her tactical display. All ships, attack now. Hit them with everything we have. Every human vessel in the solar system fired at once. Thousands of missiles and energy beams struck the unprotected Vorathian ships. The aliens scrambled to restore their Emperor Vakarath's personal warship, entered the solar system like a dark moon. The vessel was 5 times larger than the Destroyer of Worlds, built from the remains of 100 conquered civilizations. Its hull was black as space itself, covered with weapons from countless different technologies. On Earth, alarms rang across every military installation. Admiral Linda Hayes stared at the sensor readings and felt her mouth go dry. That ship has more firepower than our entire fleet combined, she said. What kind of civilization builds something like that? President Chris Bennett stood beside her, looking at the massive vessel on the display. A civilization that has been conquering others for centuries. They've had time to perfect the art of destruction. The Emperor's ship moved slowly through space, surrounded by what remained of the Vorathian fleet. Nearly 600 vessels still survived, and they formed a protective barrier around their leader. Emperor Vakarath sat on his command throne and studied the small blue planet ahead. Such a tiny world to cause so much trouble. Show me their military strength. His tactical officer displayed the information. They have approximately 300 ships remaining. My Emperor. Most are damaged. Their planet has defensive satellites and ground-based weapons, but nothing that can threaten our shields. And yet they have destroyed 200 of our ships, Vakarath said. They fight like cornered animals, desperate and unpredictable. I want to understand how they think before I destroy them. The Emperor activated a communication channel aimed at Earth. His image appeared on screens across the planet, translated by computers into human language. Humans of Earth. Vakarath's voice was cold and emotionless. I am Emperor Vakarath, ruler of the Vorathian Empire. You have fought well for primitives. You have earned the right to surrender with honor. Submit to the Empire now, and your species will be allowed to serve us. Refuse, and I will personally ensure that your world becomes a lifeless rock floating in space. The message was clear. Surrender or die. President Bennett wanted to respond immediately with defiance. But Admiral Hayes stopped him. Wait, she said. Let's think about this. The Emperor is talking to us. That means he sees us as something worth talking to. Maybe we can use that. General Aaron Blake nodded. She's right. If we can delay them, even for a few days, we can finish evacuating the civilians. Over 2 million people have already left Earth. We need more time to save more lives. President Bennett understood. So we negotiate. We pretend to consider surrender while we prepare our final defense. He composed a careful response and transmitted it to the Emperor's ship. Emperor Vakarath, your message is received. The people of Earth request time to consider your offer. We ask for 7 days to consult with our global leadership and prepare our response. On the Vorathian flagship, Emperor Vakarath received the message and smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. They want to buy time, he said to Supreme Commander Jothic, who stood nearby. They think I am stupid enough to wait while they prepare more defenses. Shall we attack immediately, my Emperor? Jothic asked. No, Vakarath said thoughtfully. I will give them 3 days. Not because I am merciful, but because I want to see what they do with the time. These humans have surprised us repeatedly. I want to understand their nature before I erase them from existence. The 3 days of ceasefire were the busiest in human history. Evacuation ships worked around the clock, carrying people to colonies on Mars, the moons of Jupiter, and deep space stations. Earth's military used the time to repair damaged ships and build new weapons. Dr. Lisa Morgan worked without sleep on a desperate project. She had been studying recordings of the Emperor's ship and noticed something interesting. The massive vessel generated an enormous amount of waste heat. All that power had to go somewhere. If we can overload their cooling systems, she explained to a team of engineers, the ship might have to reduce power to its weapons and shields. It won't destroy them, but it might give us a chance. How do we overload their cooling? An engineer named Kyle Patterson asked. We hit them with heat-based weapons, Lisa said. Plasma bombs, thermal missiles, anything that generates extreme temperatures. Force their systems to work harder and harder until they fail. It was a long shot, but they had nothing to lose. Earth's factories began producing thermal weapons as fast as possible. Commander Jake Morrison volunteered to lead the attack on the Emperor's ship. He knew it was probably a suicide mission, but he felt responsible. His gesture had started this war. He wanted to help finish it. Admiral Hayes tried to talk him out of it. Jake, you're too valuable to lose. We need experienced commanders. You have plenty of commanders, Jake said, but I know that ship better than anyone. I've studied every recording we have of it. Hayes saw the determination in his eyes and finally nodded. On the third day, Emperor Vakorath contacted Earth again. "Your time is up, humans. What is your decision?" President Bennett gave the response they had prepared. "We reject your offer of surrender. Earth and humanity will never serve an empire built on conquest and slavery. If you want our world, you'll have to take it from us." Vakorath showed no emotion. "So be it. You have chosen extinction. I will honor your bravery by making your deaths quick." The Vorathian fleet began advancing toward Earth. The Emperor's massive ship led the way, its weapons charging for the first strike. Admiral Hayes gave the order. "All ships, engage the enemy. Show them what humanity is made of." Admiral Hayes. The human fleet launched from bases across the solar system. 300 ships against 600. It should have been a massacre. But the humans had learned from every previous battle. They knew how the Vorathians fought now. They knew their weaknesses. Captain Greg Sullivan led the first wave, using the moon as cover. His ships emerged from behind Earth's natural satellite and fired a spread of missiles at the Vorathian fleet's left flank. The aliens responded with overwhelming firepower. But the human ships were already moving. Lieutenant Megan Foster commanded a group of interceptors that harassed the enemy's right side. They moved too fast for the larger alien ships to target effectively, stinging like insects and then disappearing. The real attack came from Commander Jake Morrison. He led 50 ships loaded with thermal weapons straight toward the Emperor's massive vessel. Vorathian fighters tried to intercept them, but Colonel Pete Hoffman's squadron kept them busy with a running battle through the debris field from earlier fights. Jake's ships reached firing range. "Launch everything," he commanded. Hundreds of thermal missiles and plasma bombs struck the Emperor's ship. The weapons exploded against its shields in waves of extreme heat. The ship's cooling systems immediately went into overdrive, trying to dissipate the energy. On the Vorathian flagship, alarms began ringing. "Emperor, our cooling systems are reaching critical levels," the engineering officer reported. "We must reduce power to the shields or risk a cascade failure." Emperor Vakorath refused. "Maintain full power. Destroy those ships." But the human ships kept coming. More thermal weapons struck the massive vessel. The temperature inside began rising. Cooling systems started failing one by one. "We have no choice, my Emperor," the chief engineer said. "If we do not reduce power now, the entire ship will lose all systems." End quote. Vakorath slammed his fist on the throne. "Reduce shields by 30%, but keep weapons at full power." That was the opening Admiral Hayes had been waiting for. "All ships with heavy weapons, target the Emperor's ship now." Earth's remaining battleships unleashed their main guns. Railguns firing solid metal slugs, particle beams, nuclear missiles. Everything humanity had created for war. The weakened shields of the Emperor's ship began to buckle under the assault. Emperor Vakorath stood and walked to the main viewport. He watched the human ships attacking with suicidal bravery. They were so small compared to his vessel, like children throwing rocks at a giant, but there were so many of them, and they would not stop. "These humans," he said quietly, "they fight like they have nothing to lose, because they don't." Supreme Commander Jothic replied, "We threaten to destroy their world. They are fighting for survival. That makes them more dangerous than any enemy we have faced." A massive explosion rocked the ship as human missiles penetrated the weakened shields and struck the hull. Damage reports flooded in. The Emperor's ship, the pride of the Vorathian Empire, was being hurt by primitive human weapons. On Earth, people watched the battle on their screens. They saw their ships fighting against impossible odds. They saw explosions, lighting up space, like fireworks. They saw their defenders dying to protect the planet. Dr. Lisa Morgan watched the battle from the command center. Her thermal weapon strategy was working, but the cost was terrible. Half of Jake Morrison's squadron had been destroyed. The human ships were taking heavy losses. "We can't keep this up," General Blake said. We're losing ships faster than we can replace them. Then we change tactics again, Admiral Hayes said. Kyle, are the ground-based weapons ready? Kyle Patterson nodded. The particle cannons are charged and aimed. We have one shot before they can target and destroy them. Hayes made the decision. Fire everything. Now. On Earth's surface, massive weapons installations that had been disguised as civilian structures activated. Particle beams, normally used for scientific research, had been modified into weapons. They fired simultaneously, creating pillars of energy that reached into space. The beams struck the Emperor's ship from below, hitting sections that were already damaged. The combined firepower was enormous. Shields failed completely in multiple sections. The hull began to break apart. Emperor Vakorath sat in the medical bay of his damaged flagship and stared at his hands. They were shaking, something that had not happened in centuries. The doctors worked on his injuries from the battle, but the wounds to his pride were far deeper. How many ships did we lose? He asked Supreme Commander Jothik, who stood nearby. 347, my Emperor, Jothik replied. More than half our war fleet. The humans lost 230 vessels, but they achieved their objective. We were forced to retreat. Vakorath was silent for a long moment. In 500 years of conquest, I have never retreated from a battle. These humans, who have existed as a spacefaring species for less than a century, made the Varathian Empire run away. They fight differently than anyone we have encountered, Jothik said. They do not follow our rules of war. They sacrifice themselves willingly. They turn their environment into weapons. They adapt faster than we can respond. The Emperor stood up, pushing away the medical staff. Send a message to the Imperial Council. Tell them we need to reconsider our approach to these humans. Back on Earth, the celebration was mixed with mourning. Cities held parades for the returning soldiers, but also memorials for the thousands who had died in the battles. President Chris Bennett walked through a hospital visiting wounded pilots and crew members. Commander Jake Morrison was among them. His ship had been hit during the final assault on the Emperor's vessel. He had survived, but barely. His right arm was in a cast, and his face was covered with bandages. Commander Morrison, President Bennett said, sitting beside his bed. You started this war with a hand gesture. Now, you're one of the heroes who saved us from it. Jake shook his head weakly. I'm not a hero, sir. I'm the idiot who got us into this mess. All those people who died, that's on me. No, Bennett said firmly. You made a mistake. An innocent mistake that anyone could have made. But what you did after that, leading the attack on the Emperor's ship, that took real courage. In the command center, Admiral Linda Hayes was dealing with a different problem. The Varathian fleet had retreated, but they had not left the solar system. They were regrouping beyond Neptune's orbit. What are they doing? General Aaron Blake asked, studying the tactical display. Dr. Lisa Morgan had been analyzing their movements. They're not preparing for another attack. Look at how they're positioned. Those are defensive formations. They're protecting their damaged ships while they make repairs. So, we have a stalemate, Hayes said. They can't beat us, but we can't chase them out of our system either. The truth was that both sides were exhausted. Earth's military had lost too many ships to launch an offensive. The Varathian Empire had lost too much pride to simply leave, but also too many resources to continue the war effectively. Emperor Vakorath called a meeting with his commanders. His flagship's main conference room was filled with military leaders who had served the Empire for decades. Many of them looked shocked and confused. We have a decision to make, Vakorath said. We can continue this war and possibly destroy the humans eventually, but the cost will be enormous. They have proven they will fight to the last person. Or we can do something the Empire has never done before. What is that, my Emperor? Asked one of the commanders. We can negotiate a peace, Vakorath said. The room erupted in shocked voices. Negotiate? The Varathian Empire did not negotiate. They conquered, or they destroyed. That was the way it had always been. My emperor, the other conquered species will see this as weakness. Supreme Commander Jathic warned. If we make peace with the humans, rebellions could start across the empire. Let them start, Vakorath said quietly. I have been thinking during these days of retreat. The empire is vast, but it is also fragile. We hold hundreds of worlds by force alone. If the humans can hurt us this badly, what happens when all those conquered species rise up together? He stood and looked out the window at the stars. Perhaps the age of conquest is ending. Perhaps it is time for the empire to change, or it will collapse under its own weight. On Earth, President Bennett received an unexpected message. It was from Emperor Vakorath himself, transmitted directly to Earth's leadership. Humans of Earth, I am Emperor Vakorath. I propose a meeting to discuss terms of peace. Let us end this war before more lives are wasted on both sides. The message shocked everyone. Admiral Hayes could barely believe it. Maybe, said General Blake. But what if it's real? What if we actually have a chance to end this war? President Bennett made the decision. We'll meet with him. But we do it on our terms. The meeting happens in neutral space. And both sides bring minimal security. If this is a trap, at least we'll know what kind of enemy we're really dealing with. The meeting was arranged to take place on a small asteroid between Mars and Jupiter. Both sides agreed to bring only one ship each, and no more than 10 people. President Bennett chose his delegation carefully. Admiral Hayes would come as military advisor, Dr. Lisa Morgan as science advisor, Commander Jake Morrison as the person who had started the conflict, and 6 security personnel. Emperor Vakorath brought Supreme Commander Jathic, several advisors, and his own guards. The two groups met in a temporary habitat that had been constructed on the asteroid specifically for this meeting. When President Bennett first saw Emperor Vakorath in person, he was struck by how old the alien looked. Not physically old, but tired, like someone who had carried a heavy burden for far too long. President Bennett, Vakorath said through a translation device. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Emperor Vakorath, Bennett replied. I'll be honest. I'm not sure what we're doing here. Your empire attacked us. You tried to destroy our world. Yes, Vakorath admitted. Because your commander insulted us with a hand gesture he did not understand. We responded with violence because that is all the empire knows. But you showed us something we had forgotten. What's that? Admiral Hayes asked. That strength is not the same as power, Vakorath said. The empire has power. Thousands of ships, weapons that can destroy planets, technology gathered from centuries of conquest. But you have strength. The strength to sacrifice yourselves for each other. The strength to fight against impossible odds. The strength to adapt and survive. Jake Morrison stepped forward. I'm the one who made the gesture. I started this whole war by accident. If you want someone to punish, punish me. Vakorath looked at the young commander with something almost like respect. You did not start this war, human. I did. When I chose to respond to a misunderstanding with violence instead of communication. When I decided that the Empire's pride was worth more than the lives we would lose in battle. The Emperor sat down at the meeting table. I am 500 years old. I have conquered more worlds than you have lived years. And in all that time, I never questioned whether conquest was the right path. Your species forced me to question it. President Bennett sat down across from him. So what are you proposing? Peace, Vakorath said simply. Real peace, not just a temporary ceasefire. We will not attack you again. In return, I ask that you share your knowledge with us. What knowledge? Dr. Lisa Morgan asked suspiciously. How to fight, Vakorath said. Not with weapons, but with ideas. How to adapt. How to think creatively. How to solve problems without simply overwhelming them with force. The Empire needs to learn these things, if it is to survive the future. The negotiations lasted for 3 days. Both sides argued over details. boundaries, trade agreements, and guarantees of non-aggression. But slowly, a treaty began to take shape. The final agreement included several key points. Earth and all human colonies would be recognized as independent and sovereign. The Vorathian Empire would withdraw all ships from human space. Both sides would establish embassies and begin cultural exchange programs. Any future conflicts would be resolved through negotiation, not warfare. When the treaty was signed, Emperor Vakarath stood and offered his hand to President Bennett in a human gesture of friendship. Bennett shook it firmly. "I hope we both learn from this war," Bennett said. "You learn that conquest is not the only path to greatness. We learn that the universe is bigger and more dangerous than we imagined." "Agreed," Vakarath said. "And perhaps together we can create something better than what either of us could build alone." The news of peace spread across both civilizations rapidly. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. The war that had threatened to destroy humanity was over, ended not with total victory or defeat, but with mutual understanding. In the Vorathian Empire, the reaction was more complicated. Some celebrated the end of costly warfare. Others saw it as shameful weakness. But Emperor Va-Korath addressed his people directly. "For centuries, we have measured our worth by how many worlds we control," he said. "But the humans showed us a different way. They measured their worth by how fiercely they protected what they loved. Perhaps it is time we learn to do the same." Round 6 months after the peace treaty, the first Vorathian embassy opened on Earth. Ambassador Kravas, the former admiral who had led the first attack, now worked to build friendship between the species. It was a strange turn of fate, but he embraced it. "I attacked your world because I thought you were weak," he told a group of human students visiting the embassy. "I learned that I did not understand the difference between weakness and restraint. You had the power to make our war far worse, but you chose not to. That is true strength." Commander Jake Morrison returned to space exploration, but this time with a mixed crew of humans and Vorathians. His new mission was to explore together, to prevent future misunderstandings by building bridges of knowledge and friendship. As his ship left Earth orbit, Jake looked back at the blue planet that had survived such a terrible threat. He thought about all the people who had died in the war, and the many more who had survived because of their sacrifice. "Commander," his Vorathian co-pilot said, "what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking that we almost destroyed each other over a hand gesture," Jake said. "And now we're exploring the galaxy together. Life is strange." "Yes," the Vorathian agreed. "But perhaps this strangeness is what makes it worth living." On the Vorathian homeworld, Emperor Vakorath looked at reports from across his empire. The peace with humanity had inspired rebellions on some conquered worlds, just as Jothic had predicted. But it had also inspired something else. Reform. Worlds that had been held by force were now being offered true representation in the empire. The military was being reduced, and resources redirected to science and culture. It was a difficult transformation, and not everyone was happy about it. But Vakorath had learned his lesson. Empires built on conquest eventually collapsed under their own weight. Better to change willingly than to be destroyed by refusing to adapt. Years later, historians would study the war between humanity and the Vorathian Empire. They called it many things: the accidental war, the turning point, the beginning of the new age. But those who had lived through it knew the real truth. It was the war where both sides learned that survival required more than just strength or power. It required wisdom, adaptability, and the willingness to admit when you were wrong. Earth's memorial to the war dead stood in Geneva, a tall monument of black stone with names carved in hundreds of languages. At the top, there was an inscription that both humans and Vorathians had agreed upon. They fought not because they wanted war, but because they believed in peace. They died not because they were weak, but because they were strong. May their sacrifice remind us that understanding is better than conquest, and that talking is braver than fighting. The galaxy would never forget the day that humanity accidentally declared war on an empire that devoured worlds. or the day that both sides chose peace over victory. It was a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. Emperor Vakorath felt his ship dying around him. For the first time in 500 years, he felt fear. Not fear of death, but fear of failure. These primitive humans had done what no one else had managed. They had hurt him. Retreat, he ordered. Full retreat. All ships, return to deep space. The Vorathian fleet began pulling back. They had lost over 300 ships in the battle. The Emperor's flagship was heavily damaged and would take months to repair. The human fleet did not pursue. They had lost nearly 200 ships themselves and were too damaged to continue fighting. But they had won. They had forced the mighty Vorathian Empire to retreat. Shields. But the damage was done. Over 100 ships were destroyed before they could recover. Supreme Commander Jothic stood on his damaged command deck and realized something important. These humans were willing to die to hurt the Empire. They fought with a desperation and creativity that the Vorathians had never encountered. Pull the fleet back, he ordered. We need to rethink our strategy. The Vorathian fleet retreated to the edge of the solar system. They had lost nearly 200 ships and had not even reached Earth yet. The humans had lost fewer than 100 vessels but had inflicted massive damage. Emperor Vakorath received the report and made a decision. I will come personally. If Jothic cannot break these humans, then I will do it myself. As the human forces returned to their bases, news of the battle spread across Earth. People celebrated in the streets, cheering the victory. But the military leaders knew the truth. They had won one battle against one ship. The Vorathian Empire had thousands of ships. President Chris Bennett addressed the planet that night. Today, humanity proved we can fight back. We showed an alien empire that we are not helpless. But this war is far from over. They will return with more ships. We must be ready. In deep space, Admiral Kravos sent a message to the Vorathian homeworld. The humans are more dangerous than anticipated. They fight without honor, using tactics we have never encountered. Request immediate reinforcement. Send the full war fleet. The message traveled through space at faster than light speed. It would reach the Vorathian Emperor in 3 days. The real war was about to begin. Hey, want a war? We'll give them one they never forget. The Vorathian ship continued its approach. It passed Neptune, then Uranus, moving steadily toward Earth. Every human warship in the solar system moved into position. They formed a defensive line near Jupiter, hoping to stop the alien vessel before it reached Earth. Colonel Pete Hoffman commanded the first squadron. His ships were small and fast compared to the massive alien vessel. He watched it approach on his screens and tried not to think about how hopeless this seemed. All ships, this is command. Admiral Hayes' voice came through the speakers. Remember your training. Hit and run. Don't try to fight them head on. We're faster and smaller. Use that advantage. Pete gripped the controls of his fighter. You heard the Admiral. We make them work for it. For Earth. End quote. When the 97, end quote. The Vorathian ship entered weapons range. Its hull began glowing red as it charged its weapons. The battle for Earth's survival was about to begin. And we just started an interstellar war. Danny was already sending emergency messages back to Earth. Command needs to know about this immediately. If that alien ship was serious, they might be heading to Earth right now. The journey back to Earth would take 3 days, even at maximum speed. Jake knew that the Vorathian ship might be faster. He ordered the crew to send constant updates to Earth's defense forces, warning them about what had happened. As the Valiant raced through space, Jake thought about the implications. Humanity had been alone in the universe for its entire existence. Now, within the span of an hour, they had made first contact and declared war. He wondered if Earth's military was ready for this. He wondered if the Vorathian Empire was as powerful as their ship suggested. Most of all, he wondered if humanity would survive the war that his innocent gesture had started. The stars blurred past the windows as the Valiant carried its crew toward home, racing against time to warn Earth about the danger that was coming.